I'm Teresa Caraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today I'm recording from my Appalachian childhood home, a place that I started coming back to when my parents started going into decline. And during that time, while they were living elsewhere, I spent my time transforming this house and developing an adult relationship with the town where I grew up. That's been something that is very cathartic. I recommend to everyone that they do the same. Who needs psychologists when you can just unpack real closets? So, I want to talk about housing and the contrast between this house in Cumberland, where you can buy a house for the cost of a new car, and housing in Santa Cruz, California, where you need 7 people with good incomes in order to be able to afford one family home. Let's look at this. One of the Substacks that I read regularly is Who is Robert Malone? On a recent post, he talked about an Italian organization of healthcare providers called IppocrateOrg. And it was so beautiful. It brought tears to my eyes. They have so much solidarity, and it's an organization that has stood up to the mainstream healthcare and has been committed to providing real care for their patients, no matter what their insurance is or what their danger is to their own professions. And that touched me so deeply because I long for that in economics, to have a group of people who are saying, we're not going to live with the way things are. So how do we design something that would actually work for us? And who are then comparing notes and working out the logistics, but not just shooting down each other's ideas and having no measure by which you can tell how something is working. In the interest of starting these dialogues, I've been publishing 3 op-eds recently, 2 in Santa Cruz and 1 here in Cumberland. And I'd like to look at my economic model that I'm trying to nudge out there. For those who have been following my work, you know that what I look at is that we need to take back mortgages and make those the engine of our local economies, what I call the Commonwealth, a size of about 200,000 people. And I call this episode Home is Where the Hearth Is, that the hearth is where we contain the fire economy, what Michael Hudson calls finance, insurance, real estate. Those are all ways in which money is made from money. It's not made from productive labor. What Michael says is that it used to be that banking was for encouraging and helping to fund new enterprises. So creating something that didn't exist before. Now it just takes over what's already out there, which is the real estate. And so that's not a bad thing. It just belongs to the wrong person. That what it needs to belong to is the Commonwealth, because we're the ones who built the houses. We're the ones who built the community. No banker picked up a shovel or a hammer. Housing is the intergenerational transfer of wealth, and so it needs to be the reward for those who are caring for the people in the last generation who took care of us, and also passing on the gift in a better form to the next generation in terms of improving the houses, giving education, giving increased food security, increasing the productivity of the land. These are the things that our housing needs to be what supports all of that activity. I will be putting the full transcripts of these op-eds on my Substack version, but here I'm just going to talk about them. So my first one was called Santa Cruz Hates Homeowners. And my point was that only the very rich or the very poor, preferably homeless, have a right to live in Santa Cruz. The rest of us are privileged if we've managed to hang on to a house through disasters like the fires and the earthquakes and economic downturns and divorces and pandemics. Then we must be rich. And so, as someone who is rich, we can pay infinite taxes. That's the only time that Santa Cruz doesn't hate homeowners. This woke guilt, as I call it, is, I believe, a part of the Great Reset and their twin agendas of dispossession and depopulation. For dispossession, there are two things that they're mainly trying to pry out of our hands. One is houses and the assets. The other is small businesses. And both of those have been very much at work in the pandemic. I believe that the function of government is to protect and proliferate self-reliance. So whether that's of the communities for a federal government, or whether that's families and neighborhoods for a local government. And they do that by looking at small businesses, home ownership, and small local landlords. In Santa Cruz, we are 55% renters, so they rule at the ballot box. That should be a sign of failure for the local government. And we're heading in the opposite direction, because that's not actually owning a house, that's owning a debt and being one variable interest rate away from losing everything. That's the next shakedown that's happening right now, and it is creating a feeding frenzy for the hedge funds, because as we know, the petrodollar is being divested from in the 80% of the world's population that no longer needs them for oil and gas. Because of the sanctions on Russia, that has made the petrodollar something that nations are trying to get out of their banking systems in time for the oligarchs to be able to reap their profits and protect their assets. And they're trying to turn them into real things. So a lot of that money is just hovering over the United States, where it is trying to sink its teeth into our real estate. In my second op-ed, called "If Wishes Were Houses, Beggars Would Reside," I looked at the hedge funds that are scooping up all these properties. In LA right now, 67% of all rental units and 74% of vacant buildable lots are all owned by non-human investment vehicles. What's an investment vehicle? It's your parents' and your grandparents' money. All the money that they paid for their houses went to these funds in exchange for nothing. And so they have money as no object whatsoever. In Santa Cruz, houses are going for 19% over asking price. And these are all cash deals, where in California, the median price right now is $900,000. And that requires $180K for household income. In Santa Cruz, it's about $1.5 million. They say that 180,000 homes a year need to be built in California in order to keep up with the demand. Why is there that demand? Part of it is that in Santa Cruz, we keep attracting another 20,000 students a year who are all going to want to live there. We don't own the university. The university is using the city rather than the city being serviced by the university. It is all flipped. Santa Cruz is at one extreme, but the same formula works everywhere because we bid against each other for housing based on how much debt we can possibly absorb. So the higher the income, the higher the amount of debt. But if the incomes are lower, the debt is still proportionally as high. And every time that they do something to be able to make it easier, all it does is add to the debt. So California is looking at $1 billion in home down payment loans, and all of the additional things they've done with lowering the interest rate has all made that go higher. My third op-ed is called Bloom or Bust, Cumberland and Santa Cruz. And I talk about how it seems to me, with coming back over the years, I'm seeing Cumberland through time-lapse photography, where it just seems like it's blooming in front of my eyes, with farmers markets and microbreweries, farm-to-table restaurants, small boutique retail and fair trade, and my measure of civilization, good espresso. So when I look at Cumberland, there is so much space and opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to make something happen. But there's not enough money in circulation in order to support small businesses. So in Santa Cruz, money pours like water through a sieve, where in Cumberland, it moves like slow molasses. So this is something that we could address if we were matching the money in circulation to the cost of living. An example of this, Ellen Brown, author of Web of Debt and founder of the Public Banking Institute, has an article out on achieving self-funding local sovereignty while global food systems collapse. She looks at being able to use public banks for low interest or no interest loans for food production, and also taking the interest that comes back through those public banks and pushing it back out in terms of things that support that. That's excellent, but I go further. What I look at is saying all that the money you have coming in for mortgages, you can push out in advance of those mortgages. So if you know that you have $400 a month per person coming into your banks through your community in mortgage or rents, then you know that, say, 100 of those you can put out there as subsidies for locally produced food. And if you put them out as a local credit, something that has to be targeted towards that exact purpose, then you know that for 100,000 people, for instance, 10 million in new productivity is going to be in that economy every month. And the second month, it's going to be even greater because it's going to recirculate. So how many times you can get that money to recirculate and achieve new productivity is going to be the measure of the success of your economy. While I've been here, one of my daughter's friends was driving back from North Carolina to Detroit, where he lives with his girlfriend. And so I was able to show him around Cumberland as another place that you can build a dream. Now, Detroit, as I write about in my chapter, It Takes a Pillage, is the example of how variable interest rates are used not just to destroy home ownership, but entire cities. And my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, I happen to have a vintage copy at this location. This is the original artwork done by my friend and anthropologist Shelley Arrington. Detroit is the bellwether for all of us because what they were sold were called interest swap derivatives. And what these are is a way to hedge your bets, that cities have to get variable rate loans because that's what they can sell to their populations. But then they will be sunk, just like all homeowners, if those rates go up. So what the bankers do is that they have investors give them an insurance. If the rate goes up, then the insurers will pay it. But if it goes down, then they end up paying this extra to the insurers along with the fee. In the case of LIBOR, when it was manipulated up, we all wondered, why are the bankers celebrating? The reason was that these interest swap derivatives were tied to the muni. And so while their rates went up, they ended up having to pay. And they paid the fees, they paid the investors, and they had no savings to show for it. So that's what bankrupted Detroit and made it sell off everything before its pensions funds were all purged, and it ended up in the state that it's in now. But this has actually been good for Detroit today because my friend lives on Commonwealth Street, and they had, during the pandemic, porch concerts. They have local bread bakeries. They've taken over community gardens. There are local landlords that keep up the properties, and it's a place where you can buy in and rebuild. So when I've shown him these places around here where I think, oh, this would be a great neighborhood hub. There needs to be a hard cider production, which is my daughter's boyfriend's passion. And here's a place that we could have bin sales and be able to have a little grocery store. All of these things are possible here if the amount of money ends up being in circulation to support it. But even more fun than showing him around was being able to talk through the details of what would this economic system look like. These are complicated things, but they're fun too. It's reinventing the world. And I really hope that we can get the kind of camaraderie that now exists in healthcare, where you have an entire swath of people who are saying, well, we know that we're not going to do it that way, so let's look at how we really want to do it. We can do the same thing in economics, and I hope that you'll dream with me. And if you'd like to start pragmatic dreaming, here's one on build a new model, and here's a playlist on restoring local sovereignty. Thank you for subscribing. I am so happy to have you in my community.